What if I told you there's a book, a 400-year-old book, so powerful, so captivating, it could literally drag one of history's greatest writers out of bed in the morning? Well, that's not just me talking, that's a quote from the one and only Samuel Johnson. And the book he was talking about? It's this one, Robert Burton's massive, mysterious, and honestly, shockingly modern masterpiece, The Anatomy of Melancholy. So what is this thing? This monster of a book, over 500,000 words, from way back in 1621, why are we still talking about it? Well, to really get it, to understand this massive life's work, you've got to first understand the disease it's all about.
Right, the disease of genius. Now, the book's subject is melancholy, but I need you to just throw out everything you think that word means today. Because in the 17th century, it was something way, way stranger, and maybe even more powerful.
Okay, so back then, the thinking was that your body was kind of like a chemical cocktail shaker. You had 4 main fluids, or humors, sloshing around inside you. And your health, your personality, everything depended on them being in perfect balance. Melancholy? That's what happened when one of those humors, this stuff they called black bile, just completely took over.
And we're not just talking about feeling a little down. No. An excess of black bile was thought to literally corrupt your imagination. It could lead to some of the most specific, most bizarre delusions you can think of. I mean, a baker who thinks he's made of butter, a guy convinced he's glass. Burton's book is just packed with these wild stories. It's like the mind turning on itself in the most creative ways possible. But here's the twist, the central paradox of the whole thing. For all the fear and all the weirdness, melancholy was also seen as a badge of honor. It was considered the disease of genius, the affliction of the brilliant. So you've got this wild duality, right? On one hand, it's this debilitating sickness you desperately want to cure. But on the other, it's the mark of a great mind, something you might even want to cultivate. It was this dangerous gift. The very thing that made you sick could also be the source of your genius. It's a heck of a tightrope to walk. Which brings us to the author himself, the man who didn't just study this condition, he lived it. He spent his entire life taking it apart, piece by piece. Partly as a scholar, sure, but mostly to save his own skin. He didn't even write under his own name at first. He called himself Democritus Jr. He was basically saying, I'm the new version of that old Greek philosopher who used to laugh at how crazy the world is while trying to figure out what makes us tick. It's a pretty bold claim to make. But the man behind the mask was Robert Burton. And he wasn't some laughing world traveler. He was an Oxford scholar who basically lived in his study. His own words, silent, sedentary, solitary. Just a guy, his books, and his own thoughts. For decades. And this, right here, this is the whole key to the book. He flat out says it. I write of melancholy by being busy to avoid melancholy. This whole massive project, it was therapy. It was his way of fighting his own demons by pouring all that energy into this colossal book.
And when I say colossal, I mean it. You can literally see his obsession in the page count. The book was never really done. Every time a new edition came out, it was bigger. It swelled to over 500,000 words because he just couldn't stop adding more. More causes, more cures, more weird stories. It was a living, breathing obsession.
All right, so a 400-year-old book about black bile. You'd think, okay, interesting historical footnote, but that's it, right? Wrong. Because buried deep inside all that old school medicine is a psychological insight that is just startlingly modern. It's way, way ahead of its time. Forget the humors for a second. Burton was one of the very first people to draw a clear line between traumatic loss, losing someone you love, losing your job, your health, and what we would now call clinical depression. He saw that deep grief could trigger this overwhelming state of melancholy. And just look at this. Let this sink in. He's talking about this in 1621. The foundational texts of modern attachment theory, which say pretty much the same thing, don't come out into the late 1960s. That's a gap of nearly 350 years. He was so far ahead of the curve, it's just incredible. Okay, so he was a proto-psychologist, but that's not the whole story. The book's legacy goes way beyond that. It actually changed literature. It taught a whole new generation of famous writers how to look at the human mind in a completely new way, with a kind of double vision. And you can see it right here in the work of these literary giants. Burton basically gave them a new tool for their toolbox, this Janus-faced perspective, right?
the idea that two opposite things can be true at once. So writers like Jonathan Swift or Alexander Pope, they took Burton's ideas and ran with them. They realized that a person's biggest flaw, their ruling passion, could also be the very thing that makes them great. It's funny and it's serious. It's ridiculous and it's profound. That double-edged view, that's pure Burton. So after all that, 500,000 words, thousands of references, diving into every nook and cranny of sadness, what was his big takeaway? What was his final piece of advice? It was astonishingly simple. Be not solitary, be not idle. That's it. To fight the beast of melancholy, stay busy and don't be alone. It's as true today as it was 400 years ago. And maybe that's the book's real power. It leaves you with this lingering question. If the line between genius and madness, between a fatal flaw and a driving passion, is really just a matter of perspective, well, it kind of makes you look at your own life, right? It makes you wonder about the follies we see in other people and the very same obsessions that get us out of bed in the morning.